The bridge of the Valiant was quiet except for the soft beeping of computer systems. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, reading through the daily reports on his tablet. It was supposed to be another boring patrol along the outer edge of human space. Nothing exciting ever happened out here. That was exactly how Jake liked it. Boring meant safe. Boring meant everyone went home alive. Lieutenant Sophie Blake sat at the communication station, monitoring the usual chatter between cargo ships and mining vessels. She had been doing this job for 3 years now and could spot trouble just by the tone of a distress call. Today seemed normal until her screen suddenly lit up with a signal she had never seen before. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Sophie said, adjusting her headset. "It's not on any human frequency. The signal is really weak, like it's coming from very far away." Jake set down his tablet and leaned forward. "Can you clean it up? Figure out what it is?" Sophie's fingers danced across her keyboard. "Running it through the translation software now. Sir, this is definitely alien. The pattern doesn't match anything in our database." The rest of the bridge crew turned their attention to Sophie. First Officer Amy Chen walked over from her station to look at the data. "Where is it coming from?" "The Kepler 442 system," Sophie replied. "That's at least 2 weeks away at maximum speed. The signal must have been traveling for a while to reach us." Jake stood up and walked to the communication station. "Keep working on it. I want to know what they're saying." For the next 20 minutes, Sophie and the ship's artificial intelligence worked together to decode the message. The AI was designed by the smartest scientists on Earth and could learn new languages faster than any human. Slowly, the alien words started making sense. When the translation finally appeared on the main screen, the entire bridge went silent. The message was a desperate plea for help. An alien species called the Velans were under attack. Their worlds were being invaded by something called the Krath Dominion. The Velans were peaceful people who had no real military. They were being slaughtered and enslaved. They had heard rumors about humans, about a species from a dangerous world called Earth. They were begging anyone who could hear them to come and save them. "My God," Amy whispered. "They're asking us specifically. They know about Earth." Jake felt a cold anger settling in his chest. He had seen war before. He had lost friends in combat during the Mars Rebellion 10 years ago. The idea of innocent people being hunted down and enslaved made his blood boil, but he also knew he couldn't just charge into an unknown situation without thinking it through. "Sophie, send this to command. Let them know what we found," Jake ordered. Then he pressed the intercom button. "All senior officers report to the conference room immediately." 10 minutes later, Jake sat at the head of the conference table. Amy was on his right, along with Chief Engineer Paul Briggs and Tactical Officer Lieutenant Kyle Mason. Paul was a big man from Texas with hands that could fix anything. Kyle was younger, sharp-minded, and always thinking 3 steps ahead in any fight. "We all heard the message," Jake began. "The question is, what do we do about it? Command is 2 weeks away from us and probably another 2 weeks from making a decision. By then, these Velans might all be dead or enslaved." Paul crossed his arms. "Do we even know anything about this Krath Dominion? We could be flying into a war zone with no intel." Amy pulled up a holographic display in the center of the table. "I had the AI search through all the data we've collected from trading with other alien species. The Krath Dominion is mentioned several times. They're an empire that conquers other species and takes their resources. According to the reports, they've enslaved 14 different alien races in the last 100 years. 14 species," Kyle repeated. "And no one stopped them?" "Most alien species we've met so far are pretty peaceful," Amy explained. "They come from worlds with low gravity and mild climates. They never had to develop serious weapons or military tactics. The Krath just roll over them." Jake tapped his fingers on the table. "But we're different. Very different," Kyle agreed. "Earth made us tough. We had to fight just to survive. Every other species thinks our planet is a death trap." Paul laughed without humor. "They're not wrong. Between the predators, the diseases, the earthquakes, the hurricanes, and the wars we fought with each other, Earth tried to kill us 1,000 different ways. But we're still here." Jake made his decision. "We're going to help them. I know it's against protocol to engage in alien conflicts without authorization, but I'm not going to sit here doing nothing while people are being murdered." Amy looked concerned. "Jake, if you do this, Command might court-martial you. Your career could be over." "I can live with that," Jake said firmly. "What I can't live with is knowing I had the chance to save lives and didn't take it. Anyone who doesn't want to come can stay behind." I'll take full responsibility. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Paul spoke up. I didn't join the fleet to run away from fights, Captain. My engines will get us there. My weapon systems are ready, Kyle added. Amy smiled slightly. You're going to need someone to keep you from doing something stupid. I'm in. Jake felt proud of his crew. All right then. Paul, plot a course to the Kepler 442 system. Maximum speed. Kyle, I want you to analyze everything we know about the Krath ships and weapons. Find their weaknesses. Amy, work with intelligence and learn everything possible about both the Valens and the Krath. Sophie, send a message back to the Valens. Tell them help is coming. The officers stood and moved to leave, but Jake stopped them. One more thing. We're about to face an enemy that has conquered 14 species without breaking a sweat. They probably think they're unstoppable. It's time to show the galaxy what humans can do when someone threatens innocent people. It's time to remind everyone why Earth is called a death world. The Valiant's engines roared to life, pushing the ship faster and faster until the stars outside became long streaks of light. The crew worked around the clock preparing for battle. They checked weapons, ran combat simulations, and studied every piece of information they could find about the enemy. Jake stood on the bridge, watching the stars rush past. He thought about the Velans, about families hiding in fear while soldiers hunted them. He thought about the Krath, confident in their power, never imagining that help was racing toward them at faster-than-light speed. In 2 weeks, the Krath Dominion was going to learn a hard lesson. They were about to meet humanity, and humanity did not tolerate bullies. The 2 weeks of travel felt like 2 years to Jake Morrison. Every day he wondered if they would arrive too late. Every night he dreamed about arriving at the Valen system only to find dead worlds and empty cities. His crew worked without rest, preparing for whatever they would find when they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Kyle Mason spent most of his time in the tactical center, studying the limited information they had about Krath ships. The data came from trading vessels that had encountered the Krath at a distance. The pictures showed massive warships covered in weapons. They looked terrifying, but Kyle noticed something interesting. The ships were built for show as much as function. They had huge hulls and impressive gun turrets, but their design showed no signs of ever facing a real military threat. Captain, you should see this, Kyle said one evening when Jake visited the tactical center. He pulled up a 3-dimensional image of a Krath warship. Look at their shield generators. They're powerful, but they're designed wrong for combat. Jake studied the image. What do you mean? Their shields are built to handle radiation and debris like you'd find in space naturally. They're not designed to stop weapons moving at high speed. It's like they've never fought anyone who could actually hurt them. Kyle zoomed in on the hull. And look here. The armor is thick, but it's just compressed metal. No reactive plating, no layered defense systems. These ships are meant to scare people, not fight them. So you're saying we can hurt them, Jake said. Kyle nodded. I'm saying our railguns will go through their shields like they're not even there. These ships were built by people who have never lost a battle. They got lazy. Meanwhile, Amy Chen was learning everything she could about the Velans. The AI had translated several Velan texts that were included in their distress message. The Valens were an old species, much older than humanity. They had been exploring space for thousands of years, but they were peaceful by nature. Their homeworld had low gravity and no large predators. Violence was almost unknown in their culture. The texts also included information about Earth. Amy was shocked to read how other species viewed humanity's home planet. Earth was classified as a Class 12 hazard world, one of the most dangerous planets known to support intelligent life. The report listed the threats in detail. Gravity 3 times higher than most inhabited worlds. Extreme weather patterns that could flatten cities. Volcanic activity that could block out the sun for years. Oceans filled with predators. Forests full of poisonous plants and deadly animals. Diseases that evolved faster than most species could develop medicine. The report concluded that any species evolving on Earth would either go extinct or become incredibly resilient and dangerous. Humanity was classified as a potential threat level 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. Most species maxed out at level 3. Amy showed this report to Jake. They're terrified of us and they've never even met us. Jake read through it carefully. But the Valens still called for help. They were desperate enough to contact the scary humans from the death world. That tells you how bad things are, Amy said quietly. Paul Briggs was having the time of his life. The chief engineer loved pushing the Valiant systems to their limits. He rerouted power from non-essential systems to boost the engines and weapons. He modified the railgun capacitors to fire faster. He even adjusted the inertial dampeners to handle more extreme maneuvers. Every day he found new ways to make the ship more dangerous. His engineering crew worked just as hard. They loaded extra ammunition, checked every power relay, and made sure the ship could take damage and keep fighting. Paul walked through the engine room watching his people work. These men and women were the best engineers in the fleet, and they knew what was at stake. Sophie Blake kept trying to contact the Valens, but the distance was too great. Her messages would take days to reach them, and any reply would take days to come back. She spent her time monitoring alien communications channels, trying to pick up any news about the situation. What she heard was disturbing. Other alien species were talking about the Velan invasion. They expressed sympathy but said nothing could be done. The Krath Dominion was too powerful. Several species had tried to protest to the Galactic Council, a loose organization that was supposed to maintain peace. The Council had discussed the situation and decided not to intervene. They said it was an internal matter for the Krath. Sophie reported this to Jake. "Sir, the rest of the galaxy is just going to let this happen. They're going to let the Velans die because they're too afraid to fight." Jake felt his anger growing. "Then it's a good thing we're not afraid." The day finally came when they reached the Kepler 442 system. The Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Immediately, Jake ordered the ship into stealth mode. They needed to see what they were facing before making their move. What appeared on the main screen made everyone on the bridge feel sick. 3 planets in the system were visible, and all 3 were under attack. Massive Krath warships orbited each world, their weapons firing down at the surface. Smaller transport ships were moving between the surface and the larger vessels, clearly carrying cargo, except the cargo was living beings. Sophie managed to hack into the Krath communication network. The AI translated their conversations in real time, and the words appeared as text on everyone's screens. The Krath officers were discussing the Valens like they were animals. They were sorting them into groups. Strong ones would be slaves in mines and factories. Weak ones would be killed to save resources. Children would be separated from their parents and trained to serve the Krath from a young age. One Krath commander, whose name translated to something like Thexnar, was particularly cruel. He was ordering his soldiers to destroy Velan cultural sites just for fun. He laughed as he commanded his ships to fire on a building that had stood for thousands of years. The building exploded, taking centuries of Velan art and history with it. Kyle counted the Krath ships on his tactical display. 13 warships total, 4 around each planet and 1 command ship in the center of the system. "Each one of those ships is bigger than us," Amy noted. "If we follow standard military doctrine, we should retreat and call for reinforcements." Jake stared at the screen, watching transport ships carry captured Velans away from their homes. He thought about waiting weeks or months for Earth to send a fleet. He thought about all the Velans who would die or be enslaved in that time. He made his decision. "Standard military doctrine is for normal situations," Jake said. "This isn't normal. Sophie, can you get me a direct line to the Velan resistance?" "I can try, sir," Sophie said, working at her console. "There's a lot of interference from the Krath jamming, but I might be able to punch through." It took 10 minutes, but Sophie finally established a connection. The voice that came through was female, speaking in the clicking musical language of the Valens. The AI translated instantly. "This is Sula of the Velan Resistance. Who is this? How did you get through the jamming?" Jake spoke clearly. "Sula, my name is Jake Morrison. I'm the captain of an Earth ship called the Valiant. We received your distress signal. We're here to help." There was a long silence. Then Sula's voice came back, filled with disbelief. "You're human? From Earth? The Class 12 Death World?" "That's right," Jake confirmed. "But your planet is supposed to be impossible. Our scientists say nothing should be able to survive there. The gravity alone should crush most species." Jake smiled grimly. "We're used to it. Now listen carefully, Sula. I need you to get your people to shelter. Find the strongest buildings you have and hide there. What's about to happen is going to be violent." "What are you going to do?" Sula asked. "We're going to show the Krath why you don't mess with species from Deathworlds," Jake replied. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the bridge, looking at the tactical display showing 13 Krath warships. Any sane military commander would have retreated. The numbers were impossible. The Valiant was alone, outnumbered 13-1, facing ships that were each twice her size. But Jake had not come here to run away. "Kyle, give me your best tactical analysis," Jake ordered. "How do we hurt them?" Kyle pulled up detailed scans of the nearest Krath ship. "Their shields are strong but designed for the wrong kind of threat. Our railguns fire solid tungsten rods at extremely high speeds. Their shields will try to deflect the rods like they would deflect radiation or small debris. But our rounds are too dense and moving too fast. The shields will barely slow them down." "What about their weapons?" Amy asked. "Plasma cannons and particle beams," Kyle replied. "Powerful, but they have to hit us first. Most species don't move very fast in combat, because high-speed maneuvers would kill their crews. But we're from Earth. We can handle forces that would turn other species into jelly." Paul Briggs spoke up from the engineering station. "I've got the engines running at 110% capacity. The inertial dampeners are ready for extreme maneuvers. Just say the word, Captain, and we can dance circles around these guys." Jake looked at each member of his senior crew. They all knew how dangerous this was going to be. They all knew they might not survive the next hour. But every one of them had volunteered to be here. Every one of them believed in what they were doing. "All right, here's the plan," Jake said. "We're going to hit them fast and hard. Kyle, target the ships around the closest planet. I want firing solutions on all 4 of them. Paul, as soon as we fire the first shot, I want maximum acceleration. We're not going to sit still and trade fire with them." "Aye, Captain," they both replied. "Sophie, once the shooting starts, I want you to jam their communications. Make it hard for them to coordinate. Amy, you have tactical command if anything happens to me." Amy nodded. "Understood, sir." Jake took a deep breath. "Weapons free. Engage." The Valiant dropped her stealth systems and accelerated toward the first group of Krath ships at a speed that would have been suicidal for most species. The fusion engines roared, pushing the ship faster and faster. Inside, the crew felt the pressure of acceleration, but their bodies were built for Earth's heavy gravity. This felt uncomfortable but manageable. Kyle locked onto the first Krath ship and fired. The railgun launched a tungsten rod at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile crossed the distance in seconds. The Krath ship's shields tried to deflect it, but the solid metal rod punched through as if the shields were made of paper. The projectile tore through the Krath hull, ripping through internal systems and creating a massive hole. Atmosphere explosively decompressed and the ship's hull buckled under the stress. Within seconds, the vessel broke apart. On the Krath command ship, Thexnar watched his view screen in shock. One of his warships had just been destroyed in a single hit. The enemy vessel was small, barely worth noticing, but it had punched through his ship's defenses like they were nothing. "All ships, identify and destroy that attacker," Thexnar screamed into his communicator. But the Valiant was already moving. Paul pushed the engines harder, and the ship twisted through space in a pattern that seemed random but was actually carefully calculated by the combat computer. The Krath ships turned their massive guns toward the human vessel and fired. Plasma bolts and particle beams lit up space, creating a deadly web of energy weapons. Not a single shot hit its target. The Valiant was moving too fast, changing direction too quickly. The Krath gunners could not predict where the human ship would be. They were used to fighting enemies that moved in straight lines and predictable patterns. Jake's ship was doing neither. Kyle fired again and another Krath ship exploded. Then again and a third ship lost its engine section and began tumbling out of control. The Krath fleet was in chaos. They had never faced an enemy like this before. Their powerful ships were being picked apart by a single smaller vessel that seemed impossible to hit. "They're trying to regroup," Amy reported, watching the tactical display. 4 ships are moving to form a defensive formation." "Don't let them," Jake ordered. "Kyle, break up that formation. Paul, get us in close." The Valiant dove toward the regrouping Krath ships, her railguns firing in rapid succession. The tungsten rods tore through hulls and shattered weapon systems. One Krath ship tried to ram the Valiant, hoping to at least take the enemy with them. Paul saw it coming and twisted the ship away at the last second. The Krath vessel missed by less than 100 meters. Kyle took advantage of the miss. As the Krath ship passed, he fired a full spread of missiles at point-blank range. The missiles were not the crude rockets of old Earth. These were smart weapons, each with its own targeting computer. They spread out, found weak points in the Krath ship's armor, and detonated simultaneously. The explosions tore the ship apart from the inside. Thexnar was screaming orders now, his voice filled with panic and rage. "What are these creatures? How are they doing this? One of his officers managed to analyze the human ship's movements. "Commander, their ship is pulling maneuvers that should kill any living crew. The forces involved are impossible. Then how are they surviving it?" Thexnar demanded. The officer checked his readings again. "Sir, our database says they come from a planet called Earth. It's classified as a Class 12 hazard world. The gravity there is extreme. Their bodies evolved to handle forces that would crush us." Thexnar felt something he had not experienced in years. Fear. His empire had conquered 14 species without serious resistance. Every species they had faced came from comfortable worlds with low gravity and peaceful environments. They had no real warriors, no real weapons, but these humans were different. These humans came from a world that had tried to kill them since birth. They had evolved to survive the unsurvivable. "All ships retreat to the command vessel," Thexnar ordered. "We need to concentrate our firepower." But Jake had no intention of letting the Krath regroup. "They're trying to run to their command ship. Don't let them get organized. Kyle, keep firing. Paul, stay on them." The Valiant chased the retreating Krath ships, her weapons blazing. Another ship exploded. Another lost power and went dark. The Krath were fleeing now, all thoughts of conquest forgotten. They just wanted to escape this nightmare. Sophie suddenly spoke up. "Captain, I'm intercepting a transmission from the Krath command ship. They're threatening to execute Velan prisoners if we don't stop attacking." The bridge went silent. Jake felt his anger reach a boiling point. Using prisoners as shields was the act of cowards. It was a tactic humans had seen throughout their own bloody history, and they had learned to despise it. "Open a channel," Jake ordered, "all frequencies. I want every Krath in this system to hear what I'm about to say." Sophie worked her console. "Channel open, sir." Jake spoke in a calm, cold voice that was somehow more terrifying than if he had shouted. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Valiant. I have a message for whoever is in command of the Krath forces. We have a saying on Earth: we do not negotiate with terrorists. You have threatened innocent lives. You have murdered and enslaved peaceful people. You have shown no mercy, so we will show you none in return. Every ship in this system will be destroyed or captured. Every soldier who has harmed the Valens will face justice. This is not a negotiation. This is a promise." Jake nodded to Sophie to close the channel. Then he looked at Kyle. "Target their command ship. I want that commander alive, but I want his ship crippled." "Can you do it?" Kyle studied the command ship on his display. It was the largest vessel in the Krath fleet, bristling with weapons and protected by the strongest shields. But it also had one weakness. The engines were exposed at the rear of the ship, probably because the Krath never imagined anyone would get behind them. "I can do it, sir," Kyle said, "but I'll need to get close. Really close." "Then let's get close," Jake replied. The Valiant turned toward the command ship and accelerated. Thexnar saw them coming and ordered all his remaining ships to protect him. 7 warships formed a wall between the human vessel and their commander. They fired everything they had, filling space with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Paul Briggs performed what would later be called the craziest flying in human history. He wove the Valiant through the storm of weapons fire, the ship dancing between plasma bolts and particle beams. The crew held on as the ship twisted and turned. Several shots came close enough that they could see the glow of superheated particles on the view screen. Then they were through. The Valiant emerged behind the wall of ships directly behind the command vessel. Kyle fired at the exposed engines. The railgun round struck true, destroying the main drive systems. The command ship lurched forward as it lost propulsion, then began to drift. "Their engines are dead," Kyle reported. "The ship is disabled but intact." "Good," Jake said. "Now finish off the rest of them." The battle had raged for 2 hours and the Krath fleet was broken. Of the 13 warships that had been terrorizing the Valen system, 4 were completely destroyed, their wreckage floating in orbit. The command ship was disabled, drifting without power to its engines. The remaining 8 ships were scattered, some damaged, all of them trying to decide whether to fight or flee. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching the tactical display. His ship had taken some damage from near misses, but nothing serious. Paul's flying had been incredible. Kyle's shooting had been even better. But the fight was not over yet. "Status of the remaining Krath ships?" Jake asked. Amy checked her console. 5 are attempting to form up near the second planet. 3 are trying to escape to the edge of the system. None of them seem interested in fighting anymore. What about the ground forces? Jake asked. Still active on all 3 planets, Amy replied. Thousands of Krath soldiers. They seem cut off from their command ship and don't know what to do, Jake thought quickly. The Krath ships in orbit were beaten, but letting them escape would be a mistake. They would just regroup and come back with reinforcements. And the ground forces were still a threat to the Valens. He needed to deal with both problems at once. Sophie, contact Sula again. I need to know where the Krath are holding Valen prisoners on their ships. Sophie established the connection. Sula's voice came through, filled with amazement and hope. Captain Morrison, we watched the battle from the ground. We saw what you did. It was impossible. You destroyed the Krath fleet. We're not done yet, Jake said. I need information. Which of these ships are holding your people? The 3 ships trying to escape, Sula replied. They loaded prisoners this morning. Thousands of my people are on those vessels. Jake cursed under his breath. Of course, the ships trying to run would be the ones with hostages. All right, Sula. We're going to get your people back. Keep your resistance fighters ready. We'll need their help soon. Jake turned to his crew. New priority. We need to stop those 3 ships from escaping. But we can't destroy them. There are innocent people on board. We could disable their engines like we did to the command ship, Kyle suggested. Too risky, Amy said. If we damage the wrong systems, we could kill everyone on board. Those ships aren't built with safety in mind. Jake made a decision that was either brilliant or insane. We're going to board them. Paul, get us alongside the nearest ship. Kyle, prepare the Marines for a boarding action. We're going in. In the Marine Bay, Sergeant Lisa Grant was already gearing up her team. Lisa was a tough woman from New York, who had fought in 3 different conflicts before joining the fleet. She stood in front of her 20 Marines, all of them checking their weapons and armor. Listen up, Lisa said. We're about to do something that no one has done before. We're going to board an alien warship while it's trying to run away. The Krath on board are going to be desperate and dangerous, but they also have Velen prisoners that we need to save. So watch your targets and watch your fire. The Marines loaded into breach pods small armored capsules designed to attach to enemy ships and cut through their hulls. Each pod held 5 Marines in full combat gear. The suits they wore were built for fighting in any environment, from zero gravity to toxic atmospheres. They carried weapons that could punch through the heavy armor the Krath wore naturally. The Valiant caught up with the first fleeing ship easily. The Krath vessel was fast by normal standards, but human engines were built with Earth's massive gravity in mind. They were overpowered for space travel, which made them incredibly fast. We're in position, Paul reported. Launching breach pods now. 4 pods shot from the Valiant and slammed into the Krath ship's hull. Magnetic clamps locked them in place. Thermal lances began cutting through the metal. Inside the pods, the Marines waited with weapons ready. They had trained for this, but training was different from the real thing. The lances burned through the hull and the pods punched into the ship. Atmosphere rushed past as the pressure equalized. Lisa was first through the breach, her rifle up and ready. The interior of the Krath ship was dark and filled with strange equipment. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, which made the Marines feel like they could jump twice as high. Krath soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor, tall insect-like creatures with natural armor plating covering their bodies. They carried energy weapons and screeched in their clicking language. Lisa and her team opened fire. The solid bullets from their rifles punched through Krath armor like paper. The aliens had never faced weapons like these. Their own armor was designed to protect against the energy weapons most species used. The Marines moved forward in a coordinated rush. On Earth, soldiers learned to move quickly and aggressively, taking advantage of surprise and momentum. The Krath were used to slower, more cautious opponents. They fell back in confusion as the humans charged forward. Left corridor 3 more, one Marine called out. His team pivoted and fired, dropping the Krath soldiers before they could shoot. The Marines moved like they had done this 1,000 times before, covering each other, communicating constantly, never stopping. Lisa accessed the ship's computer system through her suit's interface. The AI translated the Krath language and showed her a map of the ship. Prisoner Bay is 2 levels down. Let's move. The Marines fought their way through the ship. The Krath tried to organize a defense, but they were completely unprepared for human infantry tactics. The Marines used flashbang grenades that disoriented the Krath. They used smoke to cover their movements. They breached through walls and came at the enemy from unexpected directions. One Krath soldier, braver or more foolish than the others, charged directly at Lisa. The alien was bigger than her, covered in natural armor, and had claws that could tear through metal. Lisa did not even slow down. She fired 3 shots center mass and the Krath went down hard. Years of fighting on a high-gravity world had made humans stronger than they looked. The Marines reached the prisoner bay to find hundreds of Velans locked in cages. The amphibious aliens looked terrified, huddled together in groups. When they saw the humans breaking down the doors, some of them cried out in fear, thinking these were new captors. "It's okay," Lisa said, her suit broadcasting in translated Velan. "We're here to rescue you. Stay calm and follow our instructions." One of the Velans, an older male, stepped forward. "You're human? From Earth?" "That's right," Lisa confirmed. "Can you help organize your people? We need to move everyone to the escape pods." The old Velan nodded. Yes, we will help." While the Marines escorted the prisoners to safety, Jake was dealing with the other 2 ships. The Krath commanders, seeing what happened to the first ship, made different choices. One decided to fight, turning its weapons on the Valiant. The other decided to surrender, powering down its weapons and sending a signal of submission. Kyle dealt with the ship that chose to fight. A single railgun shot to the bridge ended the threat. The ship went dead in space, its command crew eliminated. More Marines launched to secure it and free the prisoners. The surrendering ship was boarded peacefully. The Krath crew were taken into custody without resistance. They seemed shocked that the humans did not just kill them. In Krath culture, defeated enemies were usually executed or enslaved. The concept of taking prisoners and treating them humanely was foreign to them. Back on the command ship, Thexnar sat in his darkened bridge, listening to reports of his fleet's destruction. His ships were gone. His soldiers were dead or captured. His reputation was ruined. And all because of one ship from a species he had never even heard of before today. The airlock on his command ship suddenly exploded inward. Human Marines poured through, their weapons trained on every Krath on the bridge. Thexnar reached for his sidearm, but a rifle barrel pressed against his head before his hand touched the weapon. "Don't," Lisa Grant said. "You're more valuable alive." Thexnar was dragged from his command chair and forced to his knees. He looked up at the human soldier standing over him. She was smaller than any Krath, but there was something in her eyes that made him afraid. This was a predator. This was a species that had climbed to the top of the food chain on a death world. "What are you going to do with me?" Thexnar asked, his translator making his words understandable. Lisa smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "That's not up to us. The Valens will decide what to do with you. I imagine they have some opinions about the people who murdered their families and enslaved their children." Thexnar felt true fear for the first time in his life. He had thought the Krath dominion was unstoppable. He had believed their power was absolute. Now he understood how wrong he had been. There were scarier things in the galaxy than the Krath, and one of them had just kicked down his door. Jake received reports from all 3 boarding teams. All prisoners rescued, all Krath soldiers captured or neutralized. No Marine casualties, though a few had minor injuries. He allowed himself to feel a moment of pride in his crew. They had done the impossible today. "Amy, what's the status of the remaining Krath ships?" Jake asked. 3 have surrendered. 2 are still trying to run. The last 2 are holding position near the second planet, not sure what to do. "Contact them," Jake ordered. "Tell them they have one chance to surrender. If they choose to fight." The first Velan stepped onto the bridge of the Valiant, 3 hours after the last Krath ship surrendered. Sula was smaller than Jake had imagined, maybe 4 feet tall with smooth blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her large eyes took in everything on the bridge with obvious curiosity and nervousness. She moved carefully as if afraid the floor might collapse under her feet. Jake stood to greet her. "Sula, welcome aboard. I'm Captain Jake Morrison." Sula looked up at him. Even though Jake was not particularly tall for a human, he towered over the Velan. "Captain Morrison, I do not have words sufficient to thank you. You saved my people. You destroyed the Krath fleet. You did what the entire Galactic Council said was impossible." "We did what was necessary," Jake replied. "No one should have to face genocide alone." Sula's eyes glistened with emotion. "May I ask you something, Captain? Why did you come? Your people do not know us. We have nothing to offer you in return for this help. Why did you risk your lives?" Jake thought about how to answer. He could talk about military strategy or human values, but he decided on the simple truth. Because it was the right thing to do. Humanity spent too long fighting each other on Earth. We saw too much death, too much cruelty, too much suffering. When we finally reached the stars, we promised ourselves something. Never again would we stand by and watch innocents suffer when we had the power to help them. Sula made a gesture that the translator interpreted as deep respect. The galaxy believes humans are dangerous. They say Earth is a death world that creates monsters. But I see now that Earth created something else. It created protectors. Amy Chen joined them, carrying a data pad. Sula, we need your help with something. We have thousands of Krath prisoners, including their commander Thexnar. What do you want us to do with them? Sula's expression hardened. What would your people do with them? That depends, Amy said. In human law, we have something called due process. Everyone gets a trial. Evidence is presented. A decision is made based on facts, not emotion. The guilty are punished, but the punishment fits the crime. The Krath have no such system, Sula said bitterly. They simply take what they want and destroy anyone who resists. But we Velans try to be better than our enemies. We will hold trials. Those who committed atrocities will face justice. Those who were simply following orders will be given a chance to return home, provided they never return here. And Thexnar? Jake asked. Him I want to speak to personally, Sula said. With your permission, Captain. Jake nodded to Amy, who arranged for Thexnar to be brought to one of the ship's interrogation rooms. The Krath commander was escorted by 4 armed Marines, his hands bound by human restraints. He was brought to a room where Sula waited with Jake and Amy present as witnesses. Thexnar looked at Sula with contempt. You are nothing. Your species is weak. We were doing you a favor by giving you purpose through service to the Dominion. Sula did not rise to the anger. Instead, she spoke calmly. You destroyed our cities. You murdered our children. You separated families and enslaved thousands. And for what? Resources you did not need, territory you will never use. You did this because you could, because no one was strong enough to stop you. And no one ever would have stopped us, Thexnar said, then looked at Jake. Until these monsters from their death world showed up. Tell me, Captain, what kind of planet creates species like yours? What kind of hell did you crawl out of? Jake stepped forward. You want to know about Earth? Fine, I'll tell you. Earth has gravity 3 times what you're used to. Just standing up there would break your legs. We have storms that can level cities in minutes. We have earthquakes that split the ground open. We have volcanoes that can darken the sky for years. We have diseases that evolve faster than we can cure them. We have predators that can bite through steel. Jake moved closer to the alien. But you know what the worst part of Earth is? Other humans. For thousands of years we fought each other. We built weapons to kill our own kind. We studied war like it was an art form. We learned cruelty and kindness, mercy and vengeance. Earth taught us that strength without compassion makes you a monster. But compassion without strength makes you a victim. Thexnar was silent now, his earlier bravado gone. You asked what kind of hell we came from, Jake continued. Earth is beautiful and terrible. It tried to kill us every single day, but we survived. We did not just survive, we thrived. And then we looked at all the pain and violence in our history, and we decided to be better. We decided that if we ever found other species in the galaxy, we would protect them, not exploit them. So yes, we came from hell, but we came out of it with our humanity intact. Sula spoke to Thexnar directly. You will stand trial for your crimes. You will face the families of those you murdered. You will hear testimony from those you enslaved. And then you will spend the rest of your life in a prison cell, thinking about what you have done. That is justice. Thexnar was taken away. Over the next few days, Jake and his crew worked with the Valens to restore order to their system. The captured Krath ships were searched for evidence. Every prisoner was documented. The Krath ground forces, cut off from orbital support and surrounded by angry Velans backed by human Marines, surrendered without much fight. Paul Briggs and his engineering team went down to the Velan planets to help with repairs. The Krath bombardment had damaged infrastructure and destroyed many buildings. Paul showed the Velans some human construction techniques, adapted for their lower gravity and different physiology. Within days, the Velans were rebuilding, faster than they thought possible. Sophie Blake established a permanent communication link between the Velan system and Earth. She also helped the Velans upgrade their own communication systems. The Velans had never needed strong defenses before, but Sophie insisted they at least be able to call for help if they were threatened again. Kyle Mason worked with Velan engineers to analyze the captured Krath ships. He showed them the weaknesses in Krath technology and explained how the Krath relied on intimidation rather than actual military skill. The Valens were fascinated by human weapons and tactics, though some were disturbed by how efficient humans were at violence. Amy Chen spent time with Valen leaders, discussing the political situation in the galaxy. The Galactic Council had remained silent during the invasion, which told the Valens everything they needed to know about how much protection the Council would provide. Amy suggested the Valens consider forming closer ties with humanity. Earth would welcome peaceful aliens as friends and allies. On the 5th day after the battle, Jake stood on the surface of the main Valen world. The city around him was still damaged, but Valens moved through the streets freely now. Children played in parks. Families were reunited. There was sadness for those lost, but there was also hope for the future. Sula joined him, looking at her people. Captain Morrison, I have been speaking with our government. We want to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. We want to make sure what happened here never happens to anyone else. Earth would be honored, Jake said. But you should know, if you ally with us, some species will see you as dangerous by association. Humans are not exactly popular in some parts of the galaxy. Let them think what they want, Sula replied. The species that abandoned us are not the ones who saved us. I will take the friendship of dangerous humans over the empty sympathy of cowardly bureaucrats any day. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than Jake expected. Within a week, every spacefaring species had heard about what happened in the Valen system. A single human ship had destroyed a Krath fleet that outnumbered it 13-1. Human Marines had boarded enemy ships and rescued thousands of prisoners without losing a single soldier. The Krath Dominion, which had been seen as unstoppable, had been broken in a single day. The reactions were mixed. Some species sent messages of congratulations to Earth. Others expressed concern about humanity's military capabilities. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss what they called the human question. Several species called for restrictions on human expansion into space, arguing that humans were too dangerous. Earth's response was delivered by the Secretary General in a broadcast that reached every corner of known space. The message was simple. Humanity had no interest in conquest or domination. Humans wanted to explore, to learn, and to make friends. But humanity also would not tolerate injustice. Any species that preyed on the weak, that enslaved innocent people, that committed genocide, would find humanity standing in their way. The broadcast ended with a quote that became famous across the galaxy. We come from a world that tried to kill us, so we learned to protect life. We come from a world of predators, so we learned to defend the defenseless. We come from a world of darkness, so we learned to bring light. Judge us by our actions, not by your fears. On the Valiant, Jake received orders from Earth Command. He expected to be court-martialed for engaging in an unauthorized military action. Instead, he was promoted to Commodore and given command of a new fleet. Earth was building more ships, training more Marines, and preparing to take a more active role in galactic affairs. Jake sat in his quarters, looking at the promotion orders on his screen. Amy knocked and entered. Congratulations, Commodore. You earned it, did I? Jake asked. I disobeyed. 3 months had passed since the Valiant saved the Valen system. Jake Morrison, now Commodore Morrison, stood on the bridge of his flagship with a full fleet under his command. The Valiant was no longer alone. 5 new ships had joined her, each one crewed by the best soldiers and sailors Earth could provide. They called themselves the First Contact Fleet, and their mission was simple. Answer distress calls, protect the innocent, show the galaxy what humanity stood for. The first month had been quiet, which worried Jake more than constant action would have. He knew the Krath Dominion had not forgotten what happened. 13 ships destroyed, thousands of soldiers captured, their reputation shattered. Empires built on fear and violence did not just accept defeat and go home. They retaliated. Sophie Blake interrupted his thoughts. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting a meeting with you. Just me? Jake asked. Not Earth's ambassador? Specifically you, sir. They want to meet at their headquarters on the neutral world of Centrum. They say it's urgent. Jake looked at Amy, who had also been promoted to commander and served as his second-in-command for the entire fleet. What do you think? Is this a trap? The Council is not exactly pro-human right now, Amy said. Half the species in the galaxy think we're dangerous warmongers. The other half thinks we're going to start conquering everyone. But they did invite us through official channels. It would be an insult to refuse. All right, Jake decided. Set course for Centrum, but keep the fleet on alert. If this goes wrong, I want to be able to get out quickly. The journey to Centrum took a week. The neutral world was in the center of what the various species called the Galactic Core, an area of dense star systems where most of the galaxy's civilizations lived. Earth was on the outer rim, far from the established powers. That distance had kept humanity isolated but also safe. Centrum was beautiful. The planet had been carefully maintained by the Council for thousands of years. Cities blended with nature, and the architecture represented dozens of different alien species. When Jake's shuttle landed at the Council complex, he was greeted by an official whose species he did not recognize. The alien was tall and thin with skin that seemed to change colors based on its mood. Commodore Morrison, welcome to Centrum. I am Administrator Veln. Please follow me. The Council is waiting. Jake followed Veln through corridors decorated with artwork from across the galaxy. He passed representatives from species he had only read about. Some looked at him with curiosity. Others looked at him with fear. A few looked at him with what might have been respect. The council chamber was massive, with seats arranged in a circle around a central platform. Representatives from 47 different species sat in those seats, each one a voting member of the Galactic Council. Jake was led to the center platform where he stood alone under the gaze of the entire council. The council leader, an elderly member of a species called the Tarn, spoke first. His voice was amplified so everyone could hear. Commodore Jake Morrison of Earth, you have been summoned to answer for your actions in the Velan system 3 months ago. This council has received numerous complaints about human military aggression. Jake kept his expression neutral. May I ask who filed these complaints? The Krath Dominion has filed a formal protest, the Tarn said. They claim you attacked their ships without provocation and killed thousands of their citizens. They demand reparations and your arrest for war crimes. Jake could not help but laugh, which caused a stir among the council members. The Krath invaded 3 Velan worlds. They murdered civilians. They enslaved entire populations. They destroyed cultural sites that had stood for thousands of years. And they have the audacity to claim I am the war criminal? A representative from a species called the Hyven spoke up. The Krath say they were engaged in a lawful occupation of contested territory. They claim the Velans were in violation of resource-sharing agreements. That's a lie, Jake said flatly. I have the communications records from Krath ships. Their commander, Thexnar, explicitly discussed enslaving the Velans and killing anyone who resisted. There was no lawful occupation. This was genocide, plain and simple. The Tarn looked uncomfortable. The Council is aware of your evidence. However, the Krath Dominion is a powerful empire with extensive trade relationships throughout the galaxy. Many species depend on Krath goods and services. A conflict with them would be economically devastating. Jake understood now. This was not about justice. This was about money and politics. The Council was willing to sacrifice the Velans to keep the Krath happy, because the Krath had economic power. He felt his anger rising but forced himself to stay calm. Let me make something very clear, Jake said. Humanity does not care about your economic relationships with the Krath. We do not care if they are powerful or influential. When we see innocent people being murdered, we act. That is not aggression. That is basic morality. A representative from a small, peaceful species called the Milne spoke softly. Commodore Morrison, we understand your position, but you must understand ours. Most species here come from worlds where violence is rare. We do not have the weapons or the soldiers to fight empires like the Krath. We survive through diplomacy and compromise. Your approach, while noble, puts everyone at risk. No, Jake said firmly. My approach puts bullies and tyrants at risk. If you are a peaceful species that respects the rights of others, humanity is your friend. But if you prey on the weak, if you enslave and murder, then yes, you should be afraid of us. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some representatives agreed with Jake. Others accused him of threatening the entire galaxy. The Tarn struggled to restore order, finally calling for a vote on whether to censure Earth for its actions in the Velan system. Before the vote could take place, the doors to the chamber burst open. A group of aliens rushed in, all of them from different species. They were not council members. They looked like ordinary citizens, refugees even. Veln tried to stop them, but they pushed past him. One of them, a young female from a species Jake did not recognize, ran to the center platform. Please, you must listen. We are from the Oran worlds. The Krath Dominion has invaded us. They are doing to our people what they did to the villains. We sent messages to the council months ago begging for help. No one answered. No one came. Our worlds are burning, and you sit here debating politics. The chamber went silent. The Tarn looked ashamed. The council was not aware of an invasion of the Orin worlds. That's because you did not want to know, the young Orin said. You ignore anything that would force you to act. You hide behind laws and procedures while people die. But we heard about the humans. We heard about Captain Morrison and the Valiant. We heard that humans do not hide. They fight. So we came here to beg the humans for help, since our own council has abandoned us. Jake looked at the frightened aliens standing before the council. He saw in them the same desperation he had seen in Sula's message 3 months ago. He made his decision in seconds. How many worlds are under attack? Jake asked the young Orin. 5 worlds, Commodore. Millions of my people. The Krath arrived 2 months ago and have been steadily conquering our system. We have no military. We never needed one before. Jake turned to the council. I am leaving immediately for the Orin system with my fleet. If anyone wants to stop me, you are welcome to try. But I will not sit in this chamber debating while innocent people are being slaughtered. The Tarn held up a hand. Commodore, if you do this without council approval, Earth will face sanctions, trade restrictions, travel bans. You will be isolated from the galactic community. Then isolate us, Jake said. Humanity can survive alone if we have to. We did it for thousands of years on Earth, we can do it again. But we will not compromise our values just to make you comfortable. Jake walked toward the exit, the Orin refugees following him. As he reached the door, several council members stood up. The Milne representative spoke. Commodore Morrison, wait. My species may not have weapons, but we have medical supplies and humanitarian aid. If you will accept our help, we would like to assist the Orin people. Another representative stood, then another. In the end, 12 species voted to provide support for the rescue mission. It was not a majority of the council, but it was a start. The Tarn looked around at the divided chamber and sighed. It seems, Commodore, that you have forced us to face a decision we have been avoiding. The council will table the motion to censure Earth. Instead, we will discuss how to address the Krath Dominion's aggressive expansion. But understand this. You are changing the balance of power in the galaxy. There will be consequences. There already were consequences, Jake replied. The Valens suffered them. The Orin are suffering them now. The difference is, now someone is willing to fight back. Jake and his fleet departed Centrum within hours. The 12 species that had pledged support sent ships loaded with medical supplies, food, and shelters. It was not a military fleet, but it was a humanitarian one, and it sent a message. Some species were willing to stand up for what was right, even if their own council would not. The journey to the Orin system took 5 days at maximum speed. During that time, Jake received regular updates from the Orin refugees who had come with him. The situation was worse than he had thought. The Krath had landed.